About 6 months ago now, I made a post asking people to recommend some manga that I'd be forcing myself to read. But after a few months, I felt it still wasn't enough. I mean, it's only 5 chapters from each manga. And after another week went by, I was absolutely revolted by the unsatisfying number which sat before me. And so, before I could even think, I had made an inescapable mishap. By the time I recognized my greed, it was already too late. 20 recommendations now became 50. The 100 chapters I was supposed to read more than doubled. And the deja vu might be strong here, but it was genuinely so bad that people were concerned about the runtime of this video, that it wouldn't come out, that maybe I should split it up into 2 parts. I talked to my friend about this at work, and he told me that I could just cut it down to the manga I wanted to read the most, and I told him no. But you see, there's actually 2 reasons I've decided to do this. One, ever since I created this channel, I've wanted to experience this video format at least once as what would probably be now dubbed as a very strange appreciation post. And the second reason being the fact that I don't actually read that much manga, so I'm hoping that this will not only inadvertently knock some manga off my read list, but would also introduce me to some amazing mangas that I had no idea ever existed. Now with that being said, I'm fully prepared to read some of your silliest, strangest, horny, most unapologetically stupidest black and white Japanese comic book recommendations for the sole purpose of your sadistic form of pleasure. But I have faith that we can at least start off on a good note, so get comfortable, grab some food, a drink, maybe a toy, and strap in, because this might very well be the silliest video idea I ever decide to do on this channel. The first recommendation comes from Water Weasel, who told me to read a manga called Aiki. I'm trusting that you'll start us off with a banger, Water Weasel. I spoke too soon. This manga is basically a comedic take on gang wars within the school, except the twist is that this conflict takes place in a school primarily enrolled with girls who are given Street Fighter abilities and guns. We end up following this girl and the muscle mamacita teachers who accompany her because for some reason she's their master. She also wishes to get trained by this guy in order to become stronger and remain in power over the school, I think. And at this point, I don't have any overall positive or negative feelings about this manga story, but where my issue with it begins is how this manga reveals itself to be more for gooning all the way to the point where it's actually just straight up creepy and weird, dude. And I'm definitely underselling how genuinely creepy this manga is because I do not want to get struck down by the YouTube gods within the first 3 minutes of this video. What a great way to start this video. So this one came from Teferi, and he told me to read One Piece, which is kind of cool because I've actually watched One Piece up until the early parts of Egghead, but even though I currently really love it, with the earlier parts of the show, let's just say I had opinions. Well, damn, I don't want to write off the fact that it could just be because of nostalgia, but there are parts that definitely hit me harder than when I first watched it years ago. And if it wasn't because of nostalgia, I think it was because they started it off by showing Luffy's childhood. It felt like a proper prologue as opposed to his introduction in the anime where it was just inserted after Alvida, Kobe, Zoro, and Nami. From those 5 chapters and the 1,000 episodes of One Piece I've watched, I can confidently give them my stamp of approval. I can also give my stamp of approval to this beautiful looking wallet right here. Yeah, you thought this was just a cool prop? Nope, it's an ad. This right here has been with me since the very beginning. My #1 wingman, sliding me my debit or credit card whenever I'm talking to some fine shit over a drink. Oh! Successful. Not so much. It was worn down over the years, it was bulky as all hell, and it just made my pockets look like they were performing that stupid Chubby Bunny challenge. Nobody should have to go through that humiliation, and that's why I entrusted retiring my wallets with the card holders at Founding Titan Co. Their stuff is stylish yet minimalistic and of actual premium quality for an anime adjacent product. It's made of 100% full grain calfskin leather, and I'm no leather expert, but that's the leather that they use in luxury brands. That shit's authentic. The emblems are made of genuine precious metals like 18 karat gold and silver, which you don't need to be an expert to know that is some premium stuff. Its design is slim with 4 card slots and a central node for cash, so pulling these bad boys out for an admission ticket, new headphones, a car, hell even a fucking house, or just a drink for that special somebody, everybody will know you're a class act and you will know that they care about their product because of the packaging alone. I was actually in shock seeing the signature packaging. It comes in this nice matte black box, some stickers for the respective card holders, storage pouches for the wallets themselves, and a fucking RFID protection card to ensure security on your card's information. Just make sure to let them know the type of wingmans that Founding Titan Co. and I were to you by entering the password Kezutsu at the top of the site's homepage, so you can get access towards an exclusive stock of One Piece, Hunter x Hunter, Dragon Ball, and Berserk card holders for a very limited time from the 25th to 29th of August. And if you use my code for any restocks that occur in the future, then you'll be granted that juicy free shipping, which again, you can do by using code Kezutsu. Next up, we have a recommendation from a Sapphire Animation 7613 who recommended Toriko. I'll be back in 5 chapters. Okay, so imagine Monster Hunter set in the modern day, except instead of turning the monsters into better weapons to kill other monsters, we follow this Toriko dude hunt for the most vicious ingredients ever, using only his bare hands in order to eventually create the tastiest gourmet meal ever. Now, although this isn't something I see myself continuing to read, I did actually still have a bit of fun with what I did read, mainly because it just really feels like it's not supposed to be anything more than a silly read about this dude hunting down the most ridiculous monsters ever. And when I mean ridiculous, I'm talking about a battalion of 4-armed King Kongs who are literally lined up. I personally don't see myself continuing to read this, but it still wasn't a bad read. This next recommendation is from Juan Carlos Pareja Osorios 5342, who asked me to read Tensei Shitara Deshita. Yo, did I just do that? Because I think I just did that. Alright, so we have this tiny slave demi-human girl who finds a sentient sword that ends up taking matters into its own hilt and just cleaves her owner's skull, which frees the slave girl from her contract. And then from there, this sword that was actually a regular dude in its past life devotes itself to helping this girl get stronger and eventually evolve like a fucking Pokemon. Which is alright, but to say that I wasn't a little weirded out by the dynamic between this sword who was an older dude in its past life and an actual child slave who's put at the forefront of fan service. Yeah, I'm going to move on now. The next read is from Abraham Perez 4163, and they recommended I check out Gachiakuta. He mentioned that it's made by the successor of Soul Eater and is bound to have similarities with it, which I think is really cool, except Fire Force is as far as my consumption of the one who eats souls goes. Hell yes. That is some good stuff. The story is pretty much about how this kid in the slums gets banished to the Great Abyss for doing a crime he didn't commit. But what he quickly realizes is that this abyss is actually a wasteland of garbage with trash monsters and crazy people. I honestly get heavy Fallout vibes whenever I think about it because of its depiction of society functioning in such a tragic place, which I think is really cool for a shonen series like this. I also really like the art style. It's just got this funky flow which ends up translating all the hype, the sad, and the funny moments into this super enticing gallery of graffiti. Definitely a manga I'd recommend, but if you're like me and prefer anime, it's also got that going for it. The next recommendation is from the Crimson Shinzero, who asked me to read Dorohedoro. I feel like this is just going to be an interesting read anyways, considering I've gotten so many comments on the last video talking about how it has magic that's scarier or on par with Witch Hat. Well, I guess we're just gonna have to find out, huh? Okay, I'll admit that it's definitely directly more creepy and terrifying for sure. But let me ask you this. Imagine you have a severe pickle allergy for a second. Now, is it scarier for a deranged stranger to chase you with a pickle in hand, or for a good friend, great even, who you know is a diagnosed sociopath, suddenly hand you a pickle smoothie and adamantly tell you it's just an avocado smoothie, when you can clearly smell the aroma of pickles emanating from the alleged avocado? They're both very scary in their own right, okay? Anyways, not a bad read. I liked how, although it has a very serious tone and grungy art style, it almost plays itself off as more of a comedy than anything else. Like, there's this one part where the big boss man is giving the rundown about our main characters to these mercenaries. But you see, these mercenaries have kind of grown out of their whole killing people shtick. It's not up their alley anymore. It's not what they want to continue doing. Or so that was the case right up until the boss says he'll try and kill you. And the radical shift in energy to that simple information went as so. Kill me? Shin! I'm in! This recommendation comes from Jezza9705, who told me to read Tsuyos... No. I hope it's not because I'm some slut for the isekai slop, but god damn it, it was actually not bad. I was given the Japanese title of this manga, but its English title is I got a new skill every time I was exiled, and after 100 different worlds, I was unmatched. Pretty self-explanatory. Sometimes it's a bit exposition dumpy, and it's pretty generic with the overpowered MC in an isekai world slop, but despite that, they hit you with crazy emotional lows, and then all of a sudden, the black and white picture book is no longer black and white picture book. It's pretty cool. Our next recommendation is from The Interested Guy, who asked me to read After God, and according to him, it's weird shit, but good shit. And honestly, that's my favorite types of shit. Behold, the most incredible weird shit ever. The story is set in a world that fell into this pre-apocalyptic state because one day these celestial creatures began appearing. Creatures that people eventually started to call gods. And if you so happen to actually see them, you'll either peacefully and literally pop like a water balloon or be chosen as an acolyte of that god. But what also has me super intrigued is our homegirl Kamikura, who for some reason has the eyes of these gods, and anyone who looks into her eyes feels the exact same bliss that a person would feel if they looked into the eyes of an actual god. And, you know, it only takes getting impaled or decapitated, but after that, then she locks the fuck in. But that's the good shit. The weird shit starts with this cat. A cat who can talk, who has wings, which don't even fucking work. And get this, it has not one, but two entire assholes. Like... What? There's a lot of other randomly grim and freaky things going on in this manga that just gives me heavy Chainsaw Man vibes, and I love that shit to bits, so this is something I'd recommend checking out for sure. Next is a recommendation from Shinkyo, who asked me to read HolyLand, so I'll be back in 5 chapters. I think this is going to be a manga where I need more than 5 chapters to really understand the direction and depth of where it's trying to go. Because all I really know is that this kid gets bullied, ends up naturally throwing some of the nastiest hooks, and then is targeted by more people who are either trying to get their get back or test to see if this kid is actually good at fighting or not. So for my first fighting series that's come out of Japan, it honestly wasn't a bad read. It's definitely piqued my interest, and at a certain point I was really just flowing with the dialogue and conflict that was unfolding. Solid read, may check out more. This next one is from both Sandro and Leon, and they asked me to read The Fragrant Flower Blooms with Dignity. You know, every single time I think I've scratched my itch with romance stories, I'm continuously proven otherwise. The basic gist of this story is that you have our main guy Rintaro who goes to a school full of dudes who are just trying to be dudes, and then we've got our main homegirl Waguri who goes to a prestigious all-girls school. Now these two schools just so happen to be right next to each other, and more importantly hate each other's guts for honestly no reason besides status. Yet despite that rift and unreasonably prescribed label between the schools, every single time Waguri interacts with or speaks of Rintaro, it feels so unobtainably pure. I don't know if it's because of the art, the dialogue, or how they've established Waguri's character, but she doesn't come off as clingy or annoying because everything she says feels like it's straight from the core of a genuine and authentic person. So when I see how resentful the world is, how visibly cruel and arrogant people are, and internally how self-loathing and disconnected one can be, being able to see a character such as Waguri act as that bundle of joy for every other person in the manga is everything involving the word heartwarming. Great recommendation that I forward to anyone who likes romance. This one is from Spooky, and he told me to read Drifting Dragons. See you after 5 chapters. Here is my issue. The concept is pretty cool. It's about this group of misfits who are on one of the last vessels used for hunting dragons, flying from town to town, taking up jobs, and obviously hunting dragons in this seemingly expansive and super intriguing world in and above the clouds. But these dragons aren't just your typical dragon either. Sometimes they look like this, and then other times they look like... I like how strange the depictions of the dragons are and the world this vast set of characters are exploring. So maybe this is just because I've only read 5 chapters, but the manga almost feels more like an episodic cookbook sometimes. We get little to no detail about the dragons that seem to have some mystifying lore, and the chapters usually end in one of 2 ways. We either kill the dragon and start learning how to make the perfect dragon Wellington, or the chapter ends with some sort of building climax just for it to start a whole new story beat the next chapter. And that kind of annoys me. So although I think it has a cool concept, I'm not a fan of its presentation for a story like this at least. This recommendation comes from Azurian, and they told me to read the Among Us manga. Naturally, I expect this to be the greatest piece of fiction ever. That was Among Us. I can tell you that much. So this next read is from 1714, and they asked me to read Toumei Nai no Utsuwa. So this is a BL manga. And you know, there's a first for everything, and this was definitely a first for me. A short romantic tragedy with a decently interesting concept attached to it, so maybe I'm just a weird dude, but I can't say that this was for me, or at the very least, this one wasn't. So this one is from Mushi and Laplace Factor, who said, have fun, and I'm sorry. Well, joke's on you guys, I've seen people talk about this manga, and from what I understand is that this manga is just like really bad. I've not seen what these panels are because they are constantly censored on YouTube, so I'm still pretty much in the dark. But instead of going in like some innocent, whimsical soul interested in what types of wonders this manga is all about, I instead want to ask the question, is it really that bad? Yeah, it's bad. But you see, for a little bit, I actually had this illusion that it wasn't too bad. Now, don't get me wrong. The entire first chapter is horrific. It's about this kid who gets trained by his grandpa in order to get vengeance on his childhood bullies because they murdered his fucking parents and then completely mutilated his brother. Which again, this all happened within a single chapter. Now, after that sadistic first chapter, I thought that was it. Besides maybe like 1 or maybe even 2 moments, it genuinely felt like sunshine and rainbows when compared to that beginning. That is until I got to chapter 5, the chapter where he deals with bully number 1. And after that singular dispatch that I most definitely can't show to its full extent, it hit me that I might have to rinse my brain in bleach, get baptized, and then meditate in a pool of lava for each and every single time I decide to willingly subject myself to the deranged manga that is Juujika no Rokunin. Next one on the list is a recommendation from NJ Parham 3829, who said I should read a manga called Make the Exorcist Fall in Love, and that the title is but a ruse, a lie, a deception, a manipulation from Satan himself. Dude. That right there might have been the apotheosis of best fucked up first chapters ever, while also ending it off with a wildly enticing plot setup. So basically throughout the story, we follow this 12-year-old priest who's said to eventually liberate the world from Satan. But I'm like pretty sure that's just because Bible studies to this kid was actually just code for Bible whippings. And I don't think a regular child of God would go as far as to ripping out their entire eye to repent just because they got a little horny. But you see, Satan was watching all of this. He watched him eviscerate one of the 7 deadly sins and then proceeded to commit a wildly violent act upon himself to prove his faith. And he said, "What the fuck is wrong with this kid?" So 4 years of meticulous planning, Satan realized there was only one way to truly weaken him. The answer was love. And so Satan set the stage. He announced his desire to capture an artist who would paint the stories of humans, angels, and demons that fell in love. And with the priest ready to shoulder the responsibility of bodyguard against Satan, the reality lies within the artist's true nature. The demon Lilith looking to make our homeboy fall in love with her. There is literally nothing for me to say besides, I am hooked. Fantastic recommendation. Next. The next one I'll be reading is from Delusional, and he recommended The Summer You Were There. Now, I don't mean to judge a book from its cover and title, but a romantic tragedy that's a Yuri. Amen. You know, there's a first for everything. I read my first fighting manga, my first BL manga. It's pretty much the entire purpose of this video. It's just the fact that my first Yuri is about to be a romantic tragedy, and that's kind of fucked up on so many levels from you. But I guess there's only one thing we can do now. Play a game called Is He Gonna Sob to a Yuri or Is He Gonna Forget It Ever Existed? Don't forget to place your bets in the comments as we're going to be right back after these 5 chapters. I didn't cry at all. This one came from Pac-Man Suit 4246, who told me to read Alice in Borderland. Not Alice in the Borderland, Alice in Borderland. One of my guilty pleasures are stories centered around escape rooms, and specifically the ones that are made to display the human condition. Death Parade, Tomodachi games, Squid Games, Twitter reacting to a new Rent-A-Girlfriend chapter. This manga takes that escape room idea to a whole other level by turning that into this simulation, execution, experiment system thing outside of the actual games. Let me elaborate. There's a lot of gears and muscles twitching around all suspiciously outside of the little death traps. They sporadically exist in a larger playground of sorts that's seemingly in a whole other dimension. The games themselves have varying levels of difficulty, and whenever someone survives a game, they're rewarded with a correlating amount of credits that extend how many days they can survive in that place without needing to play another game. And if they run out of credits, a laser beam from the heavens will pierce their skull. To me, this is such a cool extension to a concept that I just normally like. Next recommendation is from Simply Fwox, who said to read The Bugle Call. I'll see ya in 5 chapters. If Elden Ring was my first real step into a dark fantasy world, I'd consider The Bugle Call to be my first black and white step into a dark fantasy world. 2 facts that might anger a lot of you. This world is ugly, engulfed in wars, violence, and destruction that transcends the imagination. There are things that don't make sense. Why does this kid's wound still bleed after 2 years? Where did these towers come from? How can this kid see sounds? And why do these soldiers have the same face? These are just a few of the questions I would think of as I read this manga. If I wasn't losing my mind at every battle and panel looking like a ball dance of dismemberment, I would find myself fixated on the buds of eldritch lore that was constantly being unraveled. The Rami people being one of those evolving mysteries, people who are identified by the branch on their head, kept a secret by the government of each tower, and abilities that break the laws of nature. Specifically, our main boy Lucas has the power of turning the sounds he creates from a bugle into visual spectacles. It isn't a directly offensive based power. There won't be slurs written in the sky. Its purpose is strategic. An ability which allows him to give complex orders to numerous people just by playing the horn, and it is beyond me how that ends up translating to some of the most intensive battle sequences ever. I seriously don't think I've been hit with a battle charge where I felt as much emotion and camaraderie this raw since Erwin's My Soldier's Rage speech, which mind you was felt because of how insane the voice acting was. I've bought the manga, so if you just don't fuck with this manga, then you're fucking dead to me, is basically what I'm saying. This one is from JMacBKK, who told me to read 20th Century Boys. I forgot to mention this in the recording, but I actually bought it because I was planning to read it anyways, so the fact that someone recommended it is great because that means I'll actually get to it. You'll see me reading it physically in the recording. For those who haven't read this manga, I don't think any one of you are prepared for the psychological torment that this manga will put you through. A 5-chapter summary is like snipping a blade of grass from the heart of the Amazon. The next one I'll be reading is from Soda1391, who told me to read Billy Bat. And although this is from the same author of 20th Century Boys, I can't possibly see how this is anything more than just a nice little superhero story. I am about one more Naoki Urasawa story from being diagnosed with perpetual paranoia. What I'll be reading next is a recommendation from Yaso and Monkey King, who told me to read The Climber. Besides the genuinely obscene art sometimes, there was never a real point in these 5 chapters where I felt compelled to keep reading. And I feel that's partly due to the fact that I was repulsed by Mori's edgy, I don't need friends archetype. Like, dude, I can guarantee that nobody gives a fuck. I would actually be appalled if somebody read or heard someone say those lines and go, yup, that guy's badass. That being said, I was still quite interested in the climbing aspect and all the cool information that came with the sport. I also understand that the story eventually makes a complete shift, and for now I feel that's reason enough for me to continue reading. Not a bad read, despite everything I said. This one is a recommendation from Skullmom, and they told me to read Toilet Bound Hanako-Kun. So, like, I've known about the anime for some time now, but to this day, I still don't know what the hell this title is even about. I guess I'm about to find out, though. Right, so this ghost named Hanako is bound to a toilet, but the more paranormal fact is that I actually really like it. I think it's in line with those kinds of stories that have a cutesy slice of life feel, but then hits you with some pretty brutal shit. Like, there's these adorable little marshmallow bunny things that have lived peacefully within the school grounds for hundreds of years, but because some evil little bitch decided to spread a nasty rumor about how they'll kill anyone who spots them, the little guys are forced to align with those rumors so that they don't cease to exist. It's honestly a really dope concept, and it reminds me of how the devils work in Chainsaw Man. I like this recommendation a lot. This is from Ben Raider 1169, and they said I should read The Fable. See you in another 5 chapters. This is easily the funniest manga I've read so far. It's just about how this world-class hitman and his partner in crime attempt to live a regular life for a year. And for some reason, I can't help but just laugh at every single aspect of this manga. He's just like constantly naked in his apartment all the time, and I find that amusing. He named a bird Captain because that was literally the only name it would respond to, and I find that amusing. This girl ends up stripping down to her underwear to fuck with this heavily intoxicated dude who's stuck between her furniture on the floor, and I find that and then this dude just watches the same guy on the TV every single day and without fail continues to laugh hysterically no matter what. I find it incredibly amusing. It takes the most simple parts of them trying to acclimate as regular people and turns it into some of the most unseriously intense or randomly comedic moments ever. But I'm not even trying to say that being funny is all it's good at, because it also has this strangely philosophical and genuine intensity in some of the moments that just elevates it even more. Whoever you are, Ben Raider, thank you for recommending it, because I probably would have never made the push to actually read it if it wasn't for you. Okay, so this one's from The Masked Man, and he recommended I check out Kasane. I'll be back in 5 chapters, maybe more, and probably not less, because then that would just make me a radioactive shit-eating amoeba. So there are 3 main aspects of this manga. You've got this supremely talented actress who's dead, her equally gifted daughter who's butt ugly, and this lipstick that allows the wearer to swap faces with whoever they mac on. And the byproduct of these things combined is a murder drama that peeks into the depths of human insecurities. Things that we have no control over, things that we do have control over, and things that just aren't meant for us are showcased by both Kasane and the people she interacts with. I can't lie, the melodramatic, edgy vibe that would ooze off this manga was never really something I would generally go crazy over, and I do still think that's the case, but with Kasane, I felt a constant tug on my curiosity, almost poetic with its theme and presentation being around theatrics. I was fascinated by the drama and hooked by the driving narrative that even if Kasane's acting skills surpassed everyone before her, she would constantly crawl back into that shell with her dead mother in her ear, reminding her to be herself, not to be some cheap copy, but to steal that beautiful face and forge it into Kasane Fuichi. Fuck my bias over melodramatic edgy vibes. This is sick. This is... This next manga comes from Ninja, and they recommended I read Ashita no Jo. I'll be back in another 5 chapters. Hopefully, maybe. Oh my god, this is a very long first chapter. I wonder how many more pages until I get to the second one. Oh my god, would you look at that? Page 93. Surely I'm at the end of the chapter soon, right? What the Turns out that each chapter isn't 260 pages long, and the site I was using was just labeling each chapter as the entire volume. That being said though, I did not read 5 whole volumes thinking it was 5 chapters. I don't know if I could have done it, especially because I just wasn't feeling this one. It's about how this dude named Joe gets taken under the wings of a retired boxer who's seen better days, and from there on, Joe is trained by him to go from the trenches to what I can only imagine is the spotlight. Obviously, I wasn't exactly messing with this one myself, but I also have the credibility of an overcooked slab of steak, so I urge you to make your own opinion, unless you want this overcooked slab of steak making that opinion for you. This was a recommendation by the most relatable username I think I've ever seen, and they told me to check out a manga called Teppu. I'll be back in 5 chapters. I was always expecting the first fighting manga that I'd become heavily invested in to be, you know, Hajime no Ippo, Baki. Hell, even the manhwa called The Boxer. So do you understand the level of confusion I was undergoing when these chapters started staring into my soul and replacing my expectations completely uninvited? A manga centered around a combat sport I knew little to nothing about. Like, my knowledge of the UFC is so incredibly minimal, I could probably name off 3 fighters from the sport. Conor McGregor, the dude who beat his ass, and Dana White. But the most absurd part about the first fighting manga I've come to love is the fact that the main character is a female lead who manages to fit the athlete role literally perfectly. She's arrogant, naturally talented, and genetically gifted to the point where it's really fun to watch her both confidently throw down but also get completely fucking destroyed other times. As someone with a deep athletic background growing up, there were aspects of this manga that resonated heavily with my emotions I went through during that time of my life. Gambling addict. Thank you for this gem of a recommendation, and to return the favor, my gem of a recommendation to you is All In on Black. This one comes from Sen, and he told me to read Happiness. This literally feels like Tokyo Ghoul if it had a shoujo vibe, and I don't know why, but I really like that of it. I actually mentioned this in my video about anime adaptations, but even though I do enjoy Tokyo Ghoul, for me it always felt just a tad unnecessarily edgy for the sake of that shock factor. But with this manga, although it treads a very similar line, I find myself looking at every character as actual people rather than mentally psychotic bags of flesh. And I like that. Good read. And this next recommendation comes from Bleach.D, or as I know him, Dylan. The name I like to use partly for comedic purposes, but also partly because this British fellow is a genuine terror in my life, to whom I am at the mercy of forcing myself to read one of his silly recommendations. This was the shittiest thing I've ever read. It's something I wish I could just fully say from the bottom of my heart, but it was actually a good read. It's such a chill story about how this robot lady lives a wholesome everyday life. While it's got a little bit of mystery going on in its story, the slice of life element is its main charm, and I really like that out of it. If you want to wind down and take in something wholesome, then this is probably something I'd 100% recommend. I say that with unparalleled anguish in my heart because of where that recommendation actually comes from. The next read is a recommendation from Brushy Animations, who told me to check out Akametsu. Once again, I'll see you after 5 more chapters. This manga is about a terrorist, and I love it. So you've got this high schooler named Sho who has 2 separate lives going on. When he's living his regular day-to-day life, he's about as whimsical of a soul as you can get. But as soon as he puts that mask on, he becomes Akametsu, a whimsical, gun-waving terrorist looking to brutally murder elites at the top of Japan's government. And as Akametsu, business for him goes as so. Break into a highly secure government penthouse, ask very simple questions while waving a gun in their face, shoot their fucking toes off if they talk back all snarky, clean up the evil official before him, drag the body outside, get filled with bullet holes by the law, then explode into millions of tiny bits. All of that, and Buddy shows up to school a tad late the next day. Like, what? Yet I think the most insane thing about all of this is the fact that the elites depicted in this story are based on real people in the Japanese government at the time of when this manga was being made. So, for all intents and purposes of still being able to travel to Japan, I do not like this manga. It's blasphemous! Like, who would be so crazy to like a manga about a terrorist who strictly kills government elites? Not me. No, sir. Didn't enjoy the manga one bit. This one is from Swony P9980, and they told me to read Blam, not Blame, Blam. So you've got this cyborg named Killy whose goal is to find a human with this genetic mutation called the net terminal gene. Now you might have a multitude of questions about this at the moment, but let's cut them down to a very simple singular question. Why is he looking for someone with this gene? Well, that's a wonderful question. Dylan. You see, hundreds of millennium ago, the net terminal gene was wiped from humanity because of a virus that specifically targeted people that carried the gene. And in those hundreds of thousands of years of the net sphere being inaccessible, it continued to expand and modify the city to where it has now reached the orbit of Jupiter. That is 1.6 billion kilometers or 1 billion miles in diameter that this cyborg man is navigating in order to find a supposedly extinct gene. Even though it's something I still highly recommend, go into it with an open mind as it's not your typical manga. The next one comes from Mangalog, and he recommended I check out Tower Dungeon. Just like Blam, this one's also made by Tsutomu Nihei, and from my understanding, almost everything he's worked on after Blam has either a different format or genre entirely. So I'm pretty excited for this one. In this story, we follow a small party, a regular archer at nationals, an anomaly of a mage, and a freakishly strong farmer. These three are tasked with saving the princess being held captive in the legendary Dragon Tower, a 100-floor labyrinth harboring an ecosystem of creatures beyond the imagination. It's actually a shockingly simple story compared to what I'm used to from Tsutomu Nihei, but the more I kept reading, the more I saw that Tsutomu Nihei flair emanate off a wildly different art style. I actually really like this recommendation though. Next! Next is a read from Fawaz Faraki. I might have just offended a shit ton of people, but I don't know. They gave me a bunch of other recommendations, but told me to take my pick. So I picked Ichi the Witch because it had a cover that I thought was cool looking. It was decent. There's nothing actually bad about this manga, but I think where it went a little funky for me was how it felt like it was trying to juggle a lot of cool concepts, but those cool concepts felt as if they were just stepping stones to the comedy in this series. Maybe that's the whole point though, maybe that's literally its charm, but let me attempt to explain what I mean by this. So in this world, magic starts off as a creature called Magix, M-A-J-I-K, and in order to actually obtain magic, you have to pass the trial that is encoded within whatever magic you're dealing with. For example, long ago, the first magic that appeared was a tiny blob of water that said, "Hi, drink every drop of this water and you will be granted the water magic. That is thy trial." After this point, magic hunters would look for magic all over the world, and eventually people would begin to recognize them as witches. But the thing about all of this is that only women are actually able to use magic. Now, Ichi over here is not only a man, but a regular hunter who has not a fragment of an understanding about all that mumbo jumbo I just went over. But because he's a hunter who lives in the mountains, he has the mind of a hunter and a caveman. And so one day, after stumbling across an oversized turkey, he thought to himself, I want to hunt it a lot. I want to hunt that creature. Well, you absolute Neanderthal, I regret to inform you that the oversized turkey that you wish to hunt is actually called a magic. A magic that's lived for thousands of years, killing people, lakes, and mountains. Those poor fucking mountains. All because women have been unable to pass this magic's trial of piercing. I'm a man. Wait a minute, you're right. I'm a man. Yeah, you tell him, Ichi. Ichi then proceeded to hit him with the ferocious twist, pierced his heart, and bam! The dude's a witch! In my explanation, I poorly tried to imitate that humor. For me, that was just super janky to read, and by delivering the humor the way it did, it felt like it was just misplacing the flow of its concepts, dialogue, and even the art. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm crazy. I'm so far into this video that I don't know if what I'm saying even makes sense anymore. Matter of fact, at this point, I don't even know if anything I've been saying has been remotely coherent this entire time. This manga was recommended by 1714, and they asked me to read Nijigahara Holograph, which is apparently mind-blowing. Don't know what that could entail, but I'll find out in 5 chapters. Like most works by Inio Asano, I am completely at the mercy of his stories, and for better or worse, I am never even able to comprehend the extent of what I had just sat through. Without fail, his works feel like I'm watching a VHS tape of people's lives with no exception, completely raw and unfiltered. And so, the more I thought about this, the more I realized that they are quite literal depictions of the word sonder. The profound feeling of realizing that everyone, including strangers passing in the street, has a life as complex as one's own. This was a recommendation from Orion Logan 8114, and they told me to read The Faraway Paladin. See you in yet another 5 goddamn chapters that can take up to an hour to actually get through sometimes. And you know, after a while, that can really make a dude lose his fucking mind. A long time ago, I'd actually watched the anime, but never got around to finishing it. I think that partly had to do with the fact that I just forgot, but after reading these 5 chapters, I think I also just didn't find it that interesting. While it's an isekai, I can still see how someone is interested in understanding the laws of this world more, Will's undead family, and how he even got reincarnated in the first place. But at no point was I given any incentive to actually care about anything that this manga has to offer, and they talked a hell of a lot. Even the narrator was getting in on a big chunk of the yap, and I just could not care less. I'm sorry if this is something you really like too, it's just not for me. This next one is from Mr. Nobleman, Maida Kill, Zero Dolphin, and Red Realm, who were all incredibly passionate about having me check out Usogui. I've come to understand that if a manga has some strange shit going on, and even the most mildly interesting plot, I'll just immediately be inclined to continue reading. And I think it's safe to say that Usogui kinda meets that criteria. This manga is literally just high stakes gambling, and when I mean high stakes gambling, I mean win over $10 million if you can make it out of the slaughterhouse while being chased by him. I can easily see how a lot of people are so passionate about this manga, and from what I've heard, it seems to be one of those things that just gets crazier and crazier as you read. But at least for now, it just seems to be a really fun read more than anything else. Next recommendation is from Legavendary, Zin, and Eye of Grief, who asked me to check out Pandoras Heart. For the 36th time in this accursed thing I've decided to do, I'll see you after 5 chapters. Super intriguing manga. I love this depiction of Alice in Wonderland being some distorted and twisted abyss while having some heavy time travel implications, though I think I'll need to check out a few more chapters before knowing how I really feel about it. This one is from Virtue, and he told me to check out Real. I'll see you in another... This is a deeply emotional manga about how some misguided assholes learn what it means to be a decent human after experiencing a life-altering injury or circumstance, and what is a Takehiko Inoue story without making the vessel for that journey basketball. Great read that I highly recommend. This is from Danya, not whatever equation he changed his name to, who recommended I read Kansen Rettou. We basically follow this doctor managing to take care of patients during a pandemic, and considering what all of us had to go through not too long ago, it was a pretty sad read. The fact that this manga was built off actual data from how past epidemics played out, and as someone who works in the healthcare industry, I think it does a really good job at showing how a devastating virus not only puts a huge physical toll on patients and staff alike, but how mentally brutal it can be as well. I think it's especially hard to depict how humanity reacts to something that might give off the end of the world vibes. All that stress, frustration, and fear which swells within people is undeniably justified, and a lot of the times that can lead to them becoming scarily unpredictable. Despite this, I loved how the manga was able to use that to emphasize a very hopeful side to humanity, showing that if someone chooses to be a genuine person, it can inspire many others to follow suit. I especially love that part of the manga. Anywho, next! This was a manga recommended by Emerald Hero 24, and they asked me to check out a manga called Centuria. I'll be back in what will be just a moment for you. What the fuck? Yo, what are these? Oh my god, I'm on chapter 6. So even though I am completely aware that I probably said this before, with that awareness, I will still continue to say these exact words. This manga might have the most compelling first chapter that I've ever laid my eyes on. It's literally about how this kid goes from having to be heartless since birth, experiencing compassion for the first time, and then seeing that compassion murdered right in front of his eyes in exchange for some powers and a baby sister. It is so cool. The powers, lore, and depictions of every sentient creature in this story just has me completely obsessed. The fact that the author was also a part of the batch of assistants that helped Tatsuki Fujimoto on Fire Punch is also just incredibly poetic, because this manga is for sure going to continue making waves. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going back to reading this. Okay, so this one's from Blood Horse 2311, and they told me to read Fight Class 3. First off, this is a manhwa, not a manga! But you're lucky, because I'm so deep into this video that I don't actually care anymore. I think it tries really hard to push this intense narrative that this guy's dad is evil and took his sister, so he must save her by training in the arts of jujitsu because this random chick said so. That being said, I like the character dynamics. I love when you have some annoying comedic relief character who you don't really like, but all of a sudden they do a whole 180 and become the most reasonable character that the story has to offer. Not too bad if I do say so myself, but you do lose points for recommending a manhwa! Our next read comes from Just Dennis 1, who told me to check out Sun Ken Rock by Boichi. So you have this guy named Ken whose entire objective throughout this manga is to get a job and date a girl named Yumin, and the job he so happens to land on is being the boss of a Korean gang. Its whole gimmick is having some of the craziest, most badass fights paired with some absolutely incredible art, and then it just immediately switches to being the most unserious thing possible. I like it, but I can still feel that almost every facet of this manga is unbelievably dumb. Like, the character interactions and dialogue alone is probably the most half-baked piece of literature ever. But when a female is on page, you might as well just stop thinking or sometimes just skip their panels entirely. Because I don't know if any of you actually knew this, but Boichi started his career as a hentai artist, and I don't think he's really ever moved on from that stage of his career. If you exclude those moments though, I find it to be a hysterically exhilarating read. So this next recommendation came from Cozy Ambience, and they asked me to give Vagabond a try. Spoiler, I fuck with it. A few years ago when I went on a trip to Italy, I downloaded and read about 100 chapters, got through all of them, really enjoyed them, and like most things in my life that I would intend to get back to, forgot. But after revisiting the first 5 chapters, it really reminded me of how much I need to continue reading yet another just beautiful black and white story. You've got Slam Dunk, Real, and Vagabond. Who the fuck does this Takehiko Inoue guy think he is? The Socrates of manga? The next recommendation is from Cloud, who asked me to check out Hero Organization. I'll be back in not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5! So I've never made the conscious decision to watch, let alone read, a Japanese mecha story before. It's always, oh, this one's got romance, or oh, this one looks cool, or I literally just realized this, oh, it's made by my favorite studio ever. But this was something that I can put on the shelf of stuff that I really like. My favorite part about this story is that it's a mecha following the perspective of a dad wanting to make his son proud. And it's just so... Here is one thumb and another thumb. Next. This one actually comes from a guy named Peko, who I'm realizing has some major issues. And I can only imagine what type of recommendation Bokutachi Ga Yarimashita could possibly end up being from an individual who would rename themselves to Kizutsu's cousin. It's about how these 4 dudes get their get back on a school with the bullies that did this to one of them. And they do this by placing C4s on the school grounds that was intended to just scare them. Except, you know, they're fucking explosives. So after obliviously killing 10 people, they're just forced to sit with guilt, regret, and anxiety on how to continue living. All of that on top of the fact that it is a very strange manga. A very, very strange manga. I'm not even sure I like it. Yet for some irrepressible reason, my soul wishes to disregard the feelings that fester in my breast. This next one comes from Thomas, who asked me to read March Comes In Like a Lion. I actually remember wanting to check out this anime years ago, but like many of the things on my watch list, it sat in rot. I only scratched the surface, but I can tell it's a really good slice of life about this 17-year-old kid juggling the responsibilities of an adult while trying to cope with a past that seems to continue haunting him. Good read. Okay, so this one's from Hinyu Shibari and B. Poiling, who asked me to read I Sold My Life for 10,000 yen per year. Okay, crazy thing, this might have actually been one of the first manga I had ever read. Years ago, I remember an old TikTok friend of mine telling me to check out a little something called 3 Days of Happiness. This is that exact manga, but under a different name. I even made a whole tweet about it in 2022. This is so cool to look back on because I remember how this manga made me feel like I was being gutted with a fork. While this time was a bit different, I don't know if it's because I've already read it or if it's really showing that I've fucking changed as a person since then. Up next is a manga from Mo Gaming, and he asked me to read A Fantasy by Shoujo Juniku Oji-san to. He said this was peak, even though he followed up by saying he was forced to read it. So, I guess I'm going to find out what this could mean. So these two dudes get isekai'd into a fantasy world, and one of them just transforms into a blonde tsundere lolly. So now they're rushing to defeat the demon lord as quickly as possible in order to avoid falling in love with each other. Except that's not what they're doing at all, and that's the entire gimmick. Their interactions and thought processes perpetually fall under, I don't know if he called me cute, so let me hit one of these, and then one of those. How about one of these? Now eat one of these. Shut the fuck up! Just embrace that unfound sexuality, don't waste my fucking time, and blacklist Mo Gaming from recommending me anything ever again. This one is from 012303, and they ask that I read Yasei no Last Boss Ga Arawareta. Okay, so this one is another story about how this guy gets isekai'd into a video game, except instead of going in as who he is, he gets put into the body of his game avatar, which so happens to be a big tittied archangel lady. It's got good art and the typical overpowered main character that you'd see in an isekai. Yeah. Our next one is from Kimbo, who told me to read Fire Punch. I am actually really excited for this one. This has somehow become both the coolest and worst thing that I've ever read. So when you see a story called Fire Punch, you probably would assume that it's a guy who punches with fire. And to that assumption, I say you aren't wrong. But your assumption of what that may look like is very, very wrong. And I will now proceed to explain how one arrives at this here title. When you have a frozen world like this where food is scarce, a brother with much stronger regenerative powers than their sister, and your author is Tatsuki Fujimoto, sometimes you've got to do what you've got to do. And so, Agni is this entire village's main food source. Now I want you to ponder what may happen when a righteous war commander with the ability to create flames that perpetually burn so long as a fuel source remains discovers dismembered arms in all of their pantries. And your author is Tatsuki Fujimoto. Well, the absolute eradication of such a place. And so, while everyone and the entire village was being reduced to ash, Agni and Luna were perpetually being charred alive, screaming in agony as their blessing had become nothing but a curse of endless pain. But because Luna's regeneration was much weaker, Agni had to watch her life burn away as she struggled to utter one last word to him before being completely taken by the flames of death. Live. And from this point on, Agni spends days constantly writhing in pain from the flames that engulfed him. Weeks go by with his vocal cords beginning to literally shatter from his endless screams. But after years of unimaginable suffering and the ability to now bear the flames that still continue to eat away at his flesh, one thing remains unchanged: the last word which Luna spoke, and his desire to kill the man that ruined his life. And that is how one gets to understand why this manga is called Fire Punch. It is beyond the most roller coaster story ever, because while it's really messed up, it's also really fucking cool. But then you're also reminded that the author is Tatsuki Fujimoto, and you're bound to get weird shit inserted to the story, like Luna wanting to have her brother's babies, and then showing a future where that exact thing happens right before she becomes a charcoal husk. Only the first chapter, by the way, a literal speck of the deranged insanity that earns this manga the worst and coolest thing that I've ever decided to read. And for our 50th recommendation, the last of this absolutely absurd list of manga comes from 3 people: Assassin Cat, Riz, and Tomas Donko, who asked me to check out Magus of the Library. I can't believe I'm actually going to be saying this for the last time, but I'll see you after 5 chapters. Dude, the fuck have I just read? Whoever you 3 are, I want you to know that you probably, actually no, you have just recommended my favorite thing that has come out of this video by far. A video that was filled with tons of manga I really enjoyed. But when I say that, no amount of newfound editing techniques or views or likes or money or smiles will surmount the unbelievable experience that you have just given me by asking me to read this manga. Listen, I cried. Not only because it was sad, but because it was just that deeply profound of an experience for me. Like, throughout the first 4 chapters, it didn't feel like 4 chapters. No, it felt like one giant chapter, a prologue to a kid's adventure. Rather than setting the story within the first chapter, this author took the time to deliver great art, set amazing lore, and an inhumane amount of depth to every piece of information and panel that I believe even the most above average story wouldn't pay any mind to. In fact, it went as far to trickle in the laws and mysticism of the world before us over the full course of these first couple of long chapters. And even more, it took this meticulous way of unraveling the world by flipping what I had assumed the story was going to be and turning it into the most powerfully enticing epic, to the point that I was so captivated that I didn't even stop to question the fact that our main character's name was unknown until the very end of chapter 4. This story wasn't something that was to be built off the predetermined idea that Theo had initially imagined. A story in which he would begin adventuring across the world with the group of heroes that saved him from a place of scrutiny. It was built off when those exact heroes that existed inside the books he read, the kind of people he spent his entire 7 years of unbearable discrimination praying he would get saved by, didn't take him, and instead was told this: there will be no hero. Not for you, not for anyone. And that's because the things you see in your life are yours, and yours alone. You are the creator of your own epic. You are the only obstacle stopping yourself from viewing how your story is going to be told. There will be times you might want to look away from that page in front of you, but you can't ever forget that your hand is the only one capable of turning that page. So drive that story yourself and change the world. A manifesto of the last segment I leave you guys with before editing these last few minutes, writing this concluding sentence, saying these ending words, seeing that finish line on the software track, realizing that after 50 of some of the most amazing and most egregious manga I'll ever read, yes, after hours and life and sanity I poured into being able to finally turn that last fucking page of this video, no, of who I want to separate myself from on this channel, I am eternally grateful for everyone who decided to make this video a blip in their timeline. Literally, the only thing I have left to say is, thank you for watching. Hey there, this is just going to be a thing now, I guess, but sorry for the upload gap. again. But first off, I just want to quickly thank y'all directly for the support from the last video. It's been 4 months since then, and I still don't know how to process it. I also wanted to let you know that I have a Patreon that you can refuse to join, but if you decide against that, you now have the ability to check out a few tutorials on how I edit, a Discord server with frequent updates, and more specifically, a director's cut of this video going over what happened during the video, and extra thoughts that I decided to cut from the video in order to not make this piece of shit longer than it already was going to be. And lastly, I'll probably be streaming on Twitch or YouTube in the coming days just to answer questions or be a goof, whatever comes first. Anyways, I've literally been awake for more than 24 hours to finish this video, so if you're hearing me say these words, then just know you're a fucking lunatic. And adios, amigos.